So last night I had the privilege of watching the TADC finale in cinemas, and look, I hate to break it to you, but I loved it. Before I go on, however, I need to emphasize that this video is not going to be spoiler-free for the most part. Ideally, I would be posting this after the YouTube release, but I fear my opinions are going to change too much before then and I won't want to post this, so I feel like I should just get my initial thoughts out there with a massive spoiler warning. Okay, now that I've given you all a chance to click off, let's get right into it by first talking about my experience watching it in cinemas. And let me just say, it was magical, it was ethereal, it was enchanting. Any synonym like that, it fits. I've been told this fandom was terrible and I was going to regret going to the cinema and it was going to stink and smell bad and everyone was going to be so loud, but I was fortunate enough to have an absolutely amazing cinema. It was a packed house full of cosplayers and people holding plushies and they were absolutely amazing. It was loud, but in the best way possible. We were kind of locked in for episode 8. We did sing and quote where relevant. Some kid at one point went, "He shredded me," and that was kind of funny. We were kind of quietly singing along to the one who's running the show. The second episode 9 started, everybody locked in. I'm not even kidding. There was gasping, there was screaming, there was sobbing, there was applauding. It was everything, and yet, you weren't distracted by the movie. There were some bits that I admittedly probably missed because we were being really, really loud. But I was very, very happy to end up with a loud cinema who was actually reacting because I can't think of anything more depressing than if I had to be quiet because no one else was. That would have just been really, really sad for me. But they also knew when to shut up, which is good. So unfortunately, I'm still of the opinion that most of this fandom is good, but that could just be the little city where I live. Now we get to the actual movie. To begin, we actually got a little welcome from one of the ugly fish.
Hey there.
That was kind of funny. Kane gave a recap of the series, and then we watched episode 8. Like I said, I had a really good cinema. People were quoting, singing, staying quiet when they needed to. And then we got to episode 9, and everyone locked in, and it was amazing. Obviously, my initial reaction to it was very, very, very over the top, because I was so happy that I had a good cinema experience.
The hell was that? It was so good! I was not expecting a happy ending. Oh my gosh. That was so good. I don't understand how people are disappointed by that.
But I've had a little bit of time to kind of sit on it. And, some of my thoughts have changed. I still really, really liked it. And I don't understand why so many people are disappointed by the ending. I really, really loved it. I genuinely just think a lot of people don't understand why a lot of the decisions were made in the finale, and that's fine. You don't have to understand it, and I'm not saying I'm, perfect or whatever, but I feel like as someone who writes and thinks about things as a writer, I feel like I do understand quite a bit better than, maybe the average person does. Let's address the elephant in the room, and that's Jax's abstraction. Jax is my favorite character, and yet I am not mad about his abstraction, and I think it's because I ultimately think that's where his character was going the whole time. I've seen some people commenting on Jax's abstraction and talking about, why would you make us feel sympathy for a character and then not redeem him? Jax was never supposed to have a redemption arc. That was the whole point of his character, was that he was irredeemable, and he's like a self-inflicted tragedy, almost. He brought all of this on himself, and I don't think he could have ended in any way but abstraction, especially for the happy ending we got. I think in order for that to happen, Jax needed to abstract. And it sounds bad, and I love Jax, but I also hate Jax. Okay, so let's hop right into the review. First off, the soundtrack and the visuals. Oh my gosh, they were amazing. The soundtrack was so, so good. I was not expecting legit non-Gooseworks songs with lyrics to appear, but they did. And all the iterations of Your New Home, oh, amazing. We also did get the theme song at the start of episode 9, which was so fun. Admittedly, I commented on Jax. I was like, whoa, my guy looks sad. Which is good because I would have sang Kaufmo instead of Pomni without thinking. But anyway, I did love getting the theme song. And they still hit us with Digital Days at the end, which that's the thing too. We had an alternate outro, and I really, really wanted to have one of those, one that isn't just the standard ending, it's different animation and stuff. So cool. And the visuals, stunning. I mean, obviously this one was kind of written for cinema, unlike episode 8, which was just kind of put in cinema. I feel like they would have edited the audio a little bit to make it a bit more cinema friendly, but episode 9 was definitely made for the cinema. Frankly, I think Jax was always heading for abstraction, and I think the people who were trying to tell themselves he was going to get a redemption arc or something just don't understand. Because on the point of creating sympathy for a character that you're not going to redeem, you would also create sympathy if you're just going to, like, the equivalent of kill them off, right? Like, you can't kill off a character you don't have sympathy for. Jax's abstraction was done a little bit weirdly, though. Like, I understand they weren't going to go into full detail with it, but it was kind of abrupt. Like, he just kind of showed up on screen and everyone in the cinema went, no, he didn't. I feel like there could have been a little bit more build up. I don't agree that we needed another full-on abstraction scene, considering we got that in episode 7, but it did feel very abrupt. Like, I feel like we could have gotten at least some hint that was about to happen and then cut to the abstraction. The Jax mind-hopping thing was very, very fun. Some of the doors were absolutely hilarious and the cinema was in uproar the whole time because it was so funny. And then we get Jax's backstory. And I actually really liked the flashbacks. I usually don't like flashbacks, but I don't know, these ones are fairly well done. One thing I don't like, though, is the way Jax's, like, backstory when he was in the real world. I don't like the way that was shared. Like, I understand it was the whole, oh, you trust Ribbit enough, so you're going to talk to her. But as someone who relates to Jax, we're not just going to sit there and start spilling our guts the way he did. Like, maybe I'm used to books, right, where there would be paragraphs and paragraphs of, like, internal monologue talking about, like, oh, I can't tell this person, that would just ruin the whole brand. But, like, I don't know, I feel like the way Jax just started spilling his guts was really, really random. I did like seeing his progression with Ribbit and Kaufmo and him causing their abstraction, though, and he's basically a murderer. So, yay. My favorite character, everybody. The next point I have is it simply says Ragatha, and I know what this is about. I personally think that most of the characters were very well fleshed out, and I'm not even the biggest Ragatha fan, but I definitely think we needed more time to focus on Ragatha. I think we probably could have done with a whole episode devoted to her. I know episode 5 was supposed to be her episode. It didn't feel like that. I feel like we did need more time spent with Ragatha, especially. And some people are saying we could have done with more episodes in general. I kind of disagree. I think if we had more episodes, we could have gone more in-depth with the lore and the world building. But at the end of the day, this is a character-driven show, and I think they did everything they could with the 8 episodes really, really well. That being said, I do think we could have done with another episode with a Ragatha focus, possibly to do with the carnival. I feel like we needed to see the carnival at some point as well. But other than that, I don't see why we need, like, multiple extra episodes. But yeah, I agree, we probably could have spent more time with Ragatha, even though she did kind of get her redemption in the end with Pomni. Anyway, the pacing of episode 9 was a little bit weird, but I think that's just kind of, you have no choice in that regard. Generally, I didn't think episode 9 was that bad. People are saying, like, it's really bad and they're disappointed, but I thought it was actually really great and really well done. Again, for the number of episodes they had, I think they tied up everything they possibly could. And that does bring me to my next point. People talking about the unanswered questions. And that's the thing I think people don't understand about this show, is that it's not going to answer all of your questions. It doesn't need to. It answered everything that we need to know, and the rest is left up to interpretation. People think, oh, we never found out how the headsets work. You don't need to know that. We never found out this. You don't need to know it. We never found out that. You don't need to know it. And also people saying Ribbit and Kaufmo were wasted potential, for example. No, I hate to break it to you, but Ribbit and Kaufmo exist purely to push forward the arcs of another character, that being Jax. Not every character needs to exist as an independent being with its own backstory. And I know people hate to hear that, but that's just how it is. Unfortunately, you have your main characters and everyone else exists purely for them. Exists purely to progress their story forward. So I think the points about unanswered questions and wasted potential, very, very, I just don't think that's understanding the core of the show here. It was never going to answer all of your questions explicitly. Especially because that's just a really hard thing to do. And honestly, it's kind of a boring thing to do. Like, that's the thing. When Kinga brought up brain scans, I thought that was so random. Like, he just did it out of the blue. And I'm like, look, I understand we needed that confirmation. But you people are sitting here and saying, oh, we needed all these questions answered. Most of them would have been like that. Most of them would have been, oh, here's a random info dump. And you don't do that. I thought the brain scans thing was pretty poorly explained, to be honest. I feel like it could have come about in a better way. Anyway, I next want to talk about Kane. He did return, which I'm very happy about, and we got some excellent Truman Show references. I watched it like a week before the episode came out, and I'm so glad I did, because those references near the end. I just loved Kane so much. I think he might actually be my favorite character. And like, that's the other thing too. People are really disappointed by what happened with the blue AI. They're like, we never learned its name, or we never learned what it looked like. You weren't meant to. The whole point of the blue AI was that it never existed as its own separate entity before Kane swallowed it. It never had a name or an appearance. It was just in Kane's mind, and it manifested in the form of Bubble. And I'm so glad the Bubble is a villain. People were wrong, because I wanted to... You just weren't getting it, and I'm so glad it actually ended up the way it did. And people are saying, like, Kane just threw it away. Yes, he did. That was the point. He's just letting go of his past and resolving to start again. And again, people who are saying the blue AI needed to be its own separate entity or a whole new character are misunderstanding the point that in a show, a character-driven show like this, everyone exists purely to drive forward the main characters. Rupert and Cosmo exists purely to drive forward Jax. The blue AI exists purely to drive forward Kane. None of these were supposed to be separate characters on their own, and they were supposed to exist purely to drive the narrative forward for other characters. So yes, I did love Kane in the Void scene. I thought it was so good. I do agree that the cast was a little bit quick to forgive him, but I also don't think they forgave him. They probably did the whole cliche, it'll probably take a while, but we'll forgive you eventually. I don't know, we're all being too loud. But yeah, ultimately, I really did like how it ended. Like, I was not expecting a happy ending, and I was genuinely shocked. I was like, I can't believe after all we've done, we're getting a happy ending. And it was like pretty much exactly the ending you would have expected, and I find that so poetic, to be honest. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. For now, I'm just going to talk about the specifics of the ending. We did, in fact, get their real names and their human forms. I did not think we were ever going to see their human forms, and yet we did. And I think people are saying it's disappointing because it just didn't reach their expectations. Because at the end of the day, what made it unpredictable was how predictable it was. And I think that was kind of great, because people were coming up with all these crazy theories, and in the end, it ended exactly the way it was always going to end. Anyway, I loved seeing their human selves and where they ended up. And yeah, like I said, I think this was the ending it was always going to have. Also, Emo Jax is canon. I was so happy about that. I said that in the cinema and people laughed, but I could just be delusional. They could have been laughing at something else. I knew Jax was emo. I could see it. I could sense it. So overall, I did absolutely love this movie. Maybe I'll watch the episode back in 2 weeks and wonder what the hell I was thinking, but at the same time, I can't deny that my initial reaction to this movie was probably genuine, even if it was enhanced by such a good cinema experience, because we were just screaming at anything. Honestly. Before I finish, however, I want to touch on exactly why I think people are misunderstanding this show, and it's simply because they're coming from the point of a consumer as opposed to a writer. I know that sounds pretty dumb, I'm a consumer, and it also sounds really arrogant because I'm a writer, and it sounds like I'm claiming I'm the best writer on the planet, which I'm definitely not. But I do believe I understand a lot of the nuances better than the average consumer. And so while there are lots of valid critiques of this film, and this series in general, most of which I've already gone over, I think approaching works as a consumer rather than a writer blinds you a little bit. Like, as a consumer, you expect every question to be answered outright and systematically. Writers know this drags the story down, it's very hard to execute, and the good writers believe your consumers are clever enough to draw these connections on their own anyway. And also, a lot of the questions people have simply aren't relevant to the story at the end of the day. Sometimes you don't need to know exactly how something works, especially given the point was for the characters to simply accept their new reality. They didn't need to know how the brain scans worked, which I don't know what people are on about. They put on a headset, it scans their brains, and now they're in the circus. I don't understand why people are saying that was an unanswered question. Did you want, like, the exact molecular science behind it? Anyway, but I don't think you need to know too much about how the headsets work, for example, for the ending to make sense. Consumers also tend to go into the show with all the theories in their brain. They consume theories like they're going out of fashion, saying, no, it can't possibly end well. It can't possibly end the way it did because that's just too predictable. But I think going into the cinema with these expectations skewed a lot of people's perspectives of the movie. I learned from episodes 7 and 8 that you shouldn't go into the finale with expectations, and it totally paid off. I mean, I definitely listened to the theorists. I was even subscribed to Danny North at one point. But ultimately, going in blind or without expectations of what the ending was going to be saved the movie for me. When the leaks were going around, people were talking about how disappointing the ending was, and I can see why you might think that, especially if you go into the film as a theory watcher. In some ways, the happy ending does feel disappointing, especially when you're expecting full-on tragedy, I have no mouth and I must scream. But at the same time, I think this is exactly the ending TADC needed, and it was exactly the ending it was always going to have. It was never supposed to be I have no mouth and I must scream just based on it. Were there other things that could have happened? Of course there were. However, this exact combination of events I think is exactly how it was always going to play out. Going back to the Jack's abstraction thing, I don't believe the gang could have ever reached such a happy ending if he hadn't abstracted, and Jack's was never going to end in anything but abstraction. And if Jack's never ended in anything but abstraction, the cast was going to have that happy ending. As such, this kind of happy ending was always going to be part of the deal. Well, it still could have been a tragic ending, but I ultimately think it is good that it was a happy ending. And it sounds wild, because I genuinely did not believe we were going to get a happy ending, and then we did, and I was like, whoa. Truly though, I believe TADC got the ending it was always going to have, and I find it kind of poetic that among all the frantic theory creation and trying to come up with the most ridiculous endings possible, it ended exactly the way we thought it would back at the beginning. Like if you asked someone who'd watched episode 1 how they thought the show was going to end, wouldn't have been surprised if they told you exactly the ending we got. What's more, the fact that we got a good ending is mind-boggling to me because after all the hell we've put Gooseworks through, she still gave it a happy ending that left everyone applauding as they left the cinema. Some people are saying it felt rushed or ingenuine. I don't think so. I genuinely don't think it ended except the way it was always going to. Goose gave us something we didn't deserve, and for that I feel like we can only be grateful. Sorry for the horrible lighting, but I did just come on here to say that I forgot to mention the funny bunny hug. We did get a platonic funny bunny hug and I loved it. We also got Ragath and Pomni hugging, and the ending with Ganklin Zubel was very, very funny. I forgot to mention all of that, but I did love that. I was very, very happy to get the funny bunny hug, because I wanted that since episode 5, and it was so good! Hello, hi, it's me again with bad lighting and bad audio. A couple things I didn't touch on in this. People are wondering why Kane felt the need to scan human brains in the first place. He's an AI, he can't create anything from scratch. That's exactly why at the start of episode 8 you see him being fed images of the real world, which later became inspirations for the circus, because AI can't come up with anything on its own. Even creative AI, it can't come up with anything on its own, and so he needed actual humans to, kind of take their brain scans. Thinking about it more, I do agree we don't really know why the headsets exist in the first place, like who made them, and why do they, well, I assume Kane made them scan your brains, but maybe that one did need to be answered a little bit. And the other thing I want to touch on is actually Scratch. Because I meant to say that I actually do agree we could have fleshed out Scratch a little bit more. Unlike Ribbit and Kaufmo, he kind of did have his own story that I think we could have gone into, as the other programmer of Kane, as the person who kind of came up with the idea of Kane. What did Kinga say? Kinga said, I think Kinga confirmed what Scratch was working on, did he not? Regardless, I do agree we probably could have fleshed out Scratch more, and the more I think about it, I do see what people are on about with the headsets. We don't really know why they exist, or who decided they should scan the brains or whatever. I assume that was Kane, because he is an AI at the end of the day who could do stuff like that, but I don't know, man. At the end of the day, this was never a show that was going to answer every single question in painful detail, and I personally like it that way. So yes, I do have quite a few thoughts on the last act, and I'm obviously going to have to watch it again when it comes out on YouTube and, give my actual sane, not post-cinema thoughts, but I had such a fantastic time, and I just think so many people are misinterpreting what's happening in this movie, and I don't even care that it was the same as the leaks, honestly. I did get spoiled for the Jack's abstraction, by the way. I saw 3 comments about it, so yeah. Overall, really, really liked the episode. So, let me know what y'all thought. I feel like it was pretty good, though. So, I don't know what's going to happen with this channel now. I mean, obviously I'm going to do another T-80C9 review once it's out on YouTube, but other than that, I guess I'm just going to go back to regular fandom content, because that's the thing now. It hasn't really hit me yet. I think once it's out on YouTube, it'll feel real that this is actually over. And then it's like, what do I do now? There's nothing else coming out for the rest of 2026. Like, what am I supposed to do? So crazy. I've been watching this since the pilot, and now it's finished? Oh my word. That is crazy. I'm so glad it ended up in cinemas, though. The credits were so long. It was, like, beautiful. I was like, this is amazing. That, like, this tiny little show that I just watched, because a YouTuber I liked reacted to it, and I just casually watched it for, like, a year, and then 2025 came, and I was like, damn, I think I need to, like, invest in this show. Best decision I've ever made, honestly. That's crazy, though. I've been watching since 2023, and I just saw the finale in cinemas. Still hasn't really hit. It will at one point, though, I guarantee it. But anyway, that's pretty much all I've got for you today, so for now, I'll see you on the flip side.